Chapter 121. It turns out it was our own people. Duke used a flotation spell to arrive where the two had been hiding and inspected the four surroundings for a sign of anything out of the ordinary with a lofty air, and above everything the senior swordsman Eric also rushed in from a distance and carefully poked his head through the shrubbery. He raised his head towards Duke. Up in the sky, Mr. Duke, nothing out of the ordinary here. The wind Archmage Duke closed his eyes and didn't say a word, concentrating and listening to the wind as if trying to obtain some clues. Situated within the thick growth of branches and leaves, Han Shao and Emily were completely concealed. Their surroundings were also covered by a grey magic wall from the dark major arts. The dark major magics were veiled in mystery and adept at hiding traces of movement. As a fellow archmage, it would be difficult for Duke to detect the dark magic wall that she had set up. After a low exclamation, Emily looked at Han Shao, extremely astonished. "How did you do that?" His expression grave. Han Shao looked at Duke, who hovered in the distance, and made a careful gesture indicating for Emily not to speak and alert Duke and Eric. Extending a finger to tap Han Shao's forehead, Emily smiled. "What are you being furtive and scared about? There are thick branches and leaves concealing our whereabouts. The wall I just set up has sound insulating properties. Even if Duke is a wind major archmage, he won't be able to hear a bit of our conversation. What are you worried about?" Emily had spoken several times, but Duke, standing in the distance, was still listening with his eyes closed. It looked like he truly hadn't discovered anything. Heaving a sigh in relief, Han Shao grabbed the finger that Emily had extended and bit it, making her roll her eyes at him with a brightly flushed face. "Speak, how did you do it?" Emily, her face brilliantly red, stared at Han Shao as she asked. At this moment Emily was leaning on Han Shao's left side and half her body was pressing against him. Her full chest was resting on Han Shao's left arm and her long and smooth thigh tightly mashed against his waist. Emily, with an extremely amorous expression, was an uncontrollable temptation for Han Shao, who had just gotten an initial taste of the pleasures between man and woman. Chuckling lowly, Han Shao said, "So there's a soundproofing effect." Hey, we haven't done it on a tree yet." Han Shao grabbed Emily as soon as he'd finished speaking and moved to position her behind at his waist. He immediately started ravaging with his hands as Emily's face and neck immediately flushed red from Han Shao's actions and the finger that he'd just bit. She said, "Duke is below and Eric is also observing from below as well. We can't do this. It's too embarrassing." "No worries, that's what makes this exciting." Hey. When Han Shao had ripped Emily's shirt apart, his mouth neared her earlobes and he kissed her tenderly as he chuckled evilly in a low voice. After this string of teasing, Emily finally couldn't hold it any longer and emitted a tempting moan from her sweet lips. She forgot everything that they'd been talking about before and no longer cared that they were in a large tree with two enemies making observations around them. She voluntarily reached out a hand into Han Shao's shirt as her well-rounded bottom searched for the right position. Both of them gave out a comfortable cry when he entered. After a while, when Emily's body had gone completely soft and she'd screamed herself hoarse, everything began to slowly calm down. Maintaining their position, Emily sprawled on Han Shao's chest and used her index finger to trace small circles. She asked again, "How did you do that?" At this moment the Wind Archmage Duke and Eric had long since left. An original demon trailed far behind the two and relayed everything it reacted to into Han Shao's mind. Because the two of them had come with the intention of finding the cemetery of death, their speed in walking away wasn't that fast. They would find it difficult to escape the surveillance of the original demon within a short amount of time. Thus, Han Shao wasn't in a hurry. His large hand unconsciously roved over Emily's naked back. Han Shao asked, "How did I do what?" "I'm a dark major archmage and I didn't discover when Duke was approaching us." "You're just a minor necromancer. How could you detect this disturbance? In addition, you're a mage, but your adroitness and deftness in climbing this tree was more ridiculous than an ordinary swordsman. I've also seen how you've adjusted your breathing and heartbeat. What's going on?" Emily breathed out lightly in enjoyment after they'd calmed down from Han Shao's motions and asked him on the side. Remaining silent for a while, Han Shao said, "Apart from training in necromancy magic, I'm also training in a wondrous martial arts technique. This wondrous technique is different from ordinary fighting aura, therefore I can count as a mage swordsman. All of the particular points you saw just now are because of this martial arts technique." Her body straightening slightly, Emily looked in astonishment at Han Shao. Such a wondrous martial arts technique exists, then can you fight like a swordsman? Nodding, Han Shao said affirmatively, of course. His forehead then creased as he looked at Emily with confusion. How do you know those two? It was Emily's turn to be silent after his question. She hesitated and then said slowly, I haven't told you everything about me because I was afraid of bringing you trouble. I'm actually someone from the Lancelot Empire and was escorting the McGrady Guild smuggled goods from the Brute Merchants Alliance this time because I was investigating something. I wanted to get to the bottom of who was receiving this batch of resources that would be used for war. Honestly speaking, I belong to a secret organization. Duke and Eric have come with an unspeakable secret to the Empire this time, and their actions threaten the livelihood of the Empire. Therefore our organization is making a move against the two. Although I wasn't in the Empire, I have the clearance level to know everything that happens. I also saw Duke and Eric's headshots within the organization's files. The organization is sending people to shadow their movements. The organization said that they might appear on the borders of the Empire and thus wanted me to return to the Empire through the border. I paid quite a bit of attention, that's why I know so much. Although our organization allows everyone their space and usually won't interfere in members' lives, there's still no benefit if you know too much. The soft and tender voice emitted from Emily's mouth as she calmly relayed the entire matter and her identity. After all of this, Han Shao suddenly displayed a strange smile, scaring Emily. She wondered if something was up with him. What's wrong? Are you frightened? Don't worry, our organization answers to His Majesty the King and exists completely and only for the security of the Empire. We don't interfere in members' lives and I don't think they will be of any threat to you. Oh, are you afraid of me? Are you prepared to throw me away? Emily first explained, but then felt a bit afraid when she saw Han Shao's weird smile. This man had gotten everything of hers and was quite cute when he was acting bad. He had helped her heart enjoy the past few days in peace, and so she wouldn't let him go no matter what. Emily's heart raced frantically. Beneath Emily's worry and fear, her previously reddened and flushed face appeared full of fear and trepidation. When she got to the end, her voice was choking up. No matter how strong or mature a woman was, when she gave her body and heart to a man, she would display weakness and timidness in front of the man who had received her all. Emily was naturally no exception. After a while, Han Shao said with a shadow of a smile, your organization is called the Dark Mantle, right? Her heart leaping in fear, Emily's body stiffened as she looked at Han Shao in astonishment and shock. She asked, how do you know that? His space ring lighting up, the iron medallion that represented his identity as a Dark Mantle member, suddenly appeared in Han Shao's hand. Han Shao said to Emily, because I'm also a member of the Dark Mantle. Emily: hey, who would have thought that we'd be colleagues? Hurry and let me see your medallion and let me know what rank you are. Han Shao chuckled oddly as he grasped Emily's small hand and caressed her space ring with his finger. You wicked little brat. Emily blanked for a moment and suddenly started chuckling delightfully, splaying herself on Han Shao's chest with tears of joy. She reached out her hand and ran to take Han Shao's chest. When Han Shao was breathing out comfortably, her teeth suddenly bit down fiercely and started squeals from Han Shao. See if you dare bully me again, humph. Emily chuckled with pride when she saw Han Shao scream out of startlement. She put on an air of glaring ferociously at Han Shao before subsiding. Feeling that the distance between them and the original demon trailing Duke was increasing further, Han Shao suddenly pulled down his shirt and also looked over Emily before saying, let's follow Duke and see what he's up to. When Han Shao finished speaking, Emily recited an incantation in a low voice, and the gray air that had been surrounding them suddenly disappeared without a trace. As Han Shao poked his head out of the leaves and grabbed Emily, he directly jumped down from the tree amidst her screams. He landed solidly within the shrubs in the back and didn't cause any harm to Emily's body. Leveraging the original demon tailing Duke, Han Shao and Emily exchanged some information. Han Shao also told Emily about his recent experiences within the Dark Forest. However, he picked which ones he could say and still concealed what he had to conceal. A minion of the third Dark Star, you need to listen to me in the future or I can directly punish you. When she knew that Han Shao was just a lowly third Dark Star, Emily continued to lightly tease Han Shao along the way. Candide, one of the three heavyweights of the Dark Mantle, was at the highest level of 5th Dark Sun. Emily was already a 3rd Dark Sun and thus, Her status within the Dark Mantle would surely be very high. No wonder she had the authority to know so much. Who would have thought you would be a third Dark Sun? Hey, so what if you are? You're still conquered by my prowess. You live if I want you to live, you die if I want you to die. Han Sha-Oh smacked his palm on Emily's butt and laughed delightedly. You crude despicable little brat. I'm going to make you completely tame and make you answerable to me sooner or later. Emily's hand that was curled around Han Sha-Oh's arm suddenly pinched him fiercely and wasn't in the slightest bit angry about Han Sha-Oh's crudeness. His body suddenly froze as Han Sha-Oh discovered through the original demon that Duke and Eric had actually discovered traces of the Cemetery of Death. Duke kept circling the area around the Cemetery of Death with a frown on his face as if he discovered something. Emily stopped when Han Sha-Oh halted and looked askance at him, opening her mouth to ask, "What now? Are you annoyed at me because I said I would tame you? You know I'm joking." Shaking his head, Han Sha-Oh said lowly, "Should we kill Duke and the other?" "Let's not for now. If I'm guessing correctly, the old fox Candide must be planning on thoroughly understanding Duke's intentions. That's why he's still alive. Otherwise there's no way that the two of them would be able to leave the Lancelot Empire alive. You've just entered the Dark Mantle, so you don't know how strong the organization is. It's impossible for a Wind Archmage and a senior swordsman to escape from that sly fox Candide's hand." Emily mused deeply and then opened her mouth to explain to Han Sha-Oh. "I actually understand because I answer directly to Candide," Han Sha-Oh said in a low. Covering her surprise and looking at Han Sha-Oh, Emily said lightly, "You're joking. You're just a third Dark Star. You don't have the right to be managed by him at all." Shrugging, Han Sha-Oh said, "If you don't believe me, you can look into the internal information of the Dark Mantle. I was directly inducted by Candide and he said that I would be under his deployment in the future. That's how things are." Emily rather believed Han Sha-Oh after his words. She stroked his cheek as she said, "You're quite something, all right. How did the old fox take a fancy to you?" "Let's not talk about this, we should hurry and follow them. I think Duke and them are planning on doing something," Han Sha-Oh suddenly said and tugged Emily towards Duke and Eric's direction. Leveraging the original demon's vision, Han Sha-Oh discovered that Duke and Eric were circling the outside of the Cemetery of Death. It looked like Duke had indeed discovered something. He changed magical incantations and released several Grimwind spells. They howled around the edges of the Cemetery of Death attempting to discover something. Just as this moment, the concealed original demon discovered someone crouched within the shrubbery. This man wore a body of dark brown clothing with the color of the clothing melding into the trees. He lay there unmoving and it would be difficult to discover him if one didn't look carefully. His clothes and actions clearly indicated that he was after Duke and Eric. From the information that he'd just received from Emily, Han Sha-Oh's thoughts raced and he immediately understood that this man was likely someone that the Dark Mantle had sent to keep an eye on Duke and Eric. The Grimwind spells blew randomly and tore through everything around them. When one of the Grimwind spells blew over, it happened to crash directly into him. Although the man lay crouching on the ground and didn't move, a bloody furrow was gouged out of his body and he involuntarily cried out from the pain. "Who is it?" The sensitivity of Duke's ears were beyond belief as he heard a cry of pain from such a distance away. He'd been standing within the bushes but suddenly once again used the levitation spell to drift through the air and make straight for where the person was. Seeing that he'd been made, the person immediately stood up and planned on hastily leaving the area. However, as a Wind Archmage, Duke's speed was obviously faster than this person. He'd arrived behind the person with a whoosh as soon as he'd activated the levitation spell. "You Dark Mantle people again, you really linger and refuse to leave. You've discovered me even in the dark forest. I have to say that you Dark Mantle people are truly infinitely resourceful." Duke said this with a light smile and chanted an incantation. Great winds suddenly appeared in front of the Dark Mantle member who was attempting to leave, obstructing his path forward. The howling wind formed blades of wind and crisscrossed as they shot towards the Dark Mantle member. When his body met the obstruction, a dagger appeared in his hand as he dodged nimbly within the shrubbery, evading most of the attacks from the wind blades. He then waved the dagger to defend against the other wind blades. Explosions rang out, and although his dagger defended against a few of the wind blades, two deep gouges of blood appeared on his legs. "Oh no, the observer from our organization keeping an eye on their movements seems to have been caught. We should hurry on over. You take care of Duke and I'll handle senior swordsman Eric." Han Sha-Oh was deathly afraid that the Cemetery of Death would be revealed and thus, planned on using Emily's power to kill Duke and Eric once and for all. He immediately cried out when he saw this situation developing. Emily's facial expression immediately changed when she heard Han Sha-o's words. A gray robe suddenly appeared as it covered her entire body. She also casted the levitation spell and flew out after murmuring "Be careful" to Han Sha-o. Apart from serving within the Dark Mantle, many within the organization had other identities. Therefore, unless there was no other option available, they wouldn't easily show their true faces to others. This was the basic modus operandi of all Dark Mantle members. When Emily left, Han Sha-o also took out a gray robe to cover his entire body as two of the original demons flew towards Duke with the other closely tailing Eric. Han Sha-o was quite familiar with this area as he dashed over from another path and planned on intercepting and getting rid of Eric halfway. Han Sha-o's injuries were mostly healed by now, and his magical yuan had greatly increased after last time's experience of entering a demonic trance. As his magical yuan circulated now, it gave Han Sha-o a feeling of being free from inhibitions. When Eric heard Duke's voice, he grasped his longsword and quickly but cautiously approached the same spot. When he reached an uneven hill, Han Sha-o, who had been lying in wait, suddenly chanted a magical incantation. A bone spear suddenly shot towards Eric, and a crossbow also twanged when the bone spear materialized. When the crossbow bolt shot out, Han Sha-o's body also shot out like lightning. When Eric saw these two attacks charging towards him, Eric completely lost his composure as he panicked and used a most practical yet exceedingly ugly roll to move out of the way towards the front, not giving a thought to how he looked. The ugly method was quite useful as he evaded Han Sha-o's two waves of attacks. Eric then appeared right in front of Han Sha-o and stabbed forward with a sword imbued with dark green fighting aura. Han Sha-o hastily took out the Demon Slayer edge, but his hand trembled slightly from the impact. Eric also grunted but didn't actually make use of the opportunity to follow up. He stood up and chased in Duke's direction. Snorting lightly, Han Sha-o grasped his Demon Slayer edge and quickly followed. Another original demon who was observing Duke discovered that Emily had already exchanged blows with Duke, and it seemed that she had the upper hand. It was a pity that she seemed to be a few steps too late, as the Dark Mantle member already had multiple lacerations crossing his body. He seemed to be dead. "Master Duke, I'm going!" Eric cried out loudly and charged over with upraised sword. Duke, in the midst of his fight with Emily, had his facial expression flicker rapidly, but when he saw Han Sha-o chasing behind Eric, the staff in his hand suddenly shook as he released a hurricane spell, lifting up Han Sha-o's charging body and flinging it into the distance. At this moment, the Eye of Darkness that had been stored within Han Sha-o's space ring actually flew out of the ring, automatically flaring out with sparkling green light, opening the boundary that protected the Cemetery of Death. Han Sha-o's body also landed within the cemetery with a thud. "Oh my gosh, it really is the Cemetery of Death." Duke had been about to turn back and handle Emily when he saw the green light explode in the air, revealing the bizarre view of the Cemetery of Death. He immediately cried out with joy and suddenly dashed over, paying no heed to anything else. Eric and Emily were both incredibly astonished. They first stared dumbfounded and then sprinted forward with all their might before the boundary to the cemetery closed again. Chapter 122, Thinking for You. Tall and angular buildings were erected within the Cemetery of Death that was strewn with bones. All of them drew Duke's attention. In that instant, he concerned himself with looking around wildly and didn't continue making a move against Han Sha-o. However, when Emily rushed into the cemetery, her first task wasn't to take in the surroundings. Rather, she flew to Han Sha-o instead and asked anxiously, "Are you alright?" If it had been an ordinary person falling from such a height, they might have actually been injured. But Han Sha-o of course wasn't injured at all. He shook his head at Emily and stood up with a darkened face, fixing his gaze tightly onto the Wind Archmage Duke in the distance. Looking around with excitement, Duke said joyfully when Senior Swordsman Eric arrived next to him, "This is the Cemetery of Death, there's no doubt about it. Who would have thought that we'd actually make it inside?" "Master Duke, we didn't discover anything after such a long period of studying, but the boundary to the Cemetery of Death opened when green light was emitted from that person. It's very strange." Eric looked at Han Sha-o from afar and said lowly to Duke. Nodding, Duke said, "That's right. It looks like there's something odd about this person. That green light just now also gave me a familiar feeling. It seems to have come from the Eye of Darkness." Eric was greatly astonished when these words words were voiced. How is that possible? Grasping the demon slayer edge in his hands, Han Shao recited an incantation and the little skeleton wielding a bone dagger and sporting 7 wings appeared. 3 zombie warriors also appeared. They all held wooden clubs and barred the path to Han Shao and Emily along with the little skeleton. You were the one who opened the boundary to the cemetery of death? Emily breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that Han Shao was unharmed. She then recalled what had just happened and asked Han Shao with great confusion. Nodding, Han Shao said with a darkened face, "That's right. The cemetery of death was opened by something on my body. Duke and Eric must die now. You help me take care of Duke and I'll explain to you after we kill them." Emily didn't ask anything else after hearing Han Shao speak thus, and docilely picked up her magic staff, setting her sights on the approaching Duke with a look full of killing intent. He's also a necromancer to boot. It looks like this will be a slightly difficult fight. Eric had traded blows with Han Shao and could feel that Han Shao's strength was not in the slightest bit weaker than his own. When he saw that Han Shao had even summoned zombie warriors, his brow creased as he spoke. "Kill them first. We're excavating the secrets of the cemetery of death." Duke snorted lightly and floated over. Eric didn't say much else after pausing for a moment and following Duke in a charge over. A string of incantations leisurely surged out of Emily's mouth. The magic staff in her hand suddenly shot out a few strands of black air and like snakes twisted and twined towards the approaching Duke. When Duke saw the black air attacking him, his face became incomparably grave. A tornado formed suddenly in front of him and churned up all the white bones on the ground. It made for the black air and twisted all of them into the tornado. Snorting coldly, Emily said, "Be careful," to Han Shao, and also flew towards the black air. She waved the magic staff in her hand and started fighting fiercely with Duke within the air. "We shouldn't just idly stand around either." Han Shao grinned and gave a long laugh. The little skeleton led the 3 zombie warriors in heading towards Eric. At the same time, Han Shao kept an eye behind Eric and Duke via the original demons, observing their every gesture and move. "Do you think 3 zombies and a skeleton are enough to stop me?" Eric snorted lowly with disdain as dark green fighting aura flared out of the longsword in his hand. His body was like a bulldozer as he sent dirt and dust flying as he charged directly toward Han Shao. Continuously laughing coldly within his heart, Han Shao made use of his mental strength to manipulate the zombie warriors and little skeleton blocking the way in front of him. The little skeleton's usual speed was as fast as lightning, but was now being purposefully curtailed by Han Shao so that he was as slow as the zombie warriors. Dashing over Eric's dark green fighting aura formed a ball of light as it enclosed a zombie warrior within it. The sound of bones exploding suddenly emitted from the zombie warrior's body. Beneath the effects of the dark green fighting aura, the first zombie warrior's had its body shattered. Its wooden club also broke into several segments. Turning his body sideways with a disdainful smirk, Eric's nimble body evaded the crashes from the other 2 zombie warriors' wooden clubs and stabbed forward with his longsword, slashing open the neck of another zombie warrior. The zombie warrior swayed and looked like it was about to fall down. The little skeleton raised the bone dagger and pressed itself against the other zombie warrior, jerkily raising the bone dagger in its hand and stabbing it towards Eric. Eric could easily handle even the zombie warriors, so he paid absolutely no attention to the little skeleton's upraised dagger, raising his sword rather impatiently to block the strike. At this moment, the originally abnormally slow bone dagger suddenly increased more than tenfold in its striking speed. The previously stiff and slow little skeleton became so agile that it caused Eric's eyes to bug out. Eric's longsword had just started rising and he hadn't had time to make his move before the bone dagger was already landing on its target. Eric retreated in horrified fright, but he was still a beat too slow. A puncturing sound rang out as a large piece of flesh and blood flew out from his chest. As Eric cried out in pain, he also called out with incredulity, "How is this possible?" Exclamation mark. "What kind of skeletal warrior is this?" It was a pity that the little skeleton had no reaction to Eric's astonished yells. When he had succeeded with one of his blows, he didn't relax and immediately followed up afterwards. He didn't wait for Eric to stabilize his footing before appearing in front of him. As Eric's fighting aura gathered anew on his longsword, the 7 bone spurs on the back of the little skeleton's spine flared out at the same time and they flew in a semicircle, landed accurately on Eric's body. The 7 bone spurs pierced through Eric's neck, forehead and heart. He didn't even have time to release the fighting aura that he'd gathered before his body fell backward. afterwards. The frightened and terrified expression on his face didn't even vanish in death. Duke and Emily had been fighting when they both noticed the disturbance on this side. When they saw that Tarek had died a gruesome death, both were surprised. However, Duke's worry and Emily's joy followed closely after that surprise. Emily had already witnessed the little skeleton's miraculousness last time, and even she, a dark archmage, had been powerless in the face of the little skeleton's pursuit. The little skeleton's nimbleness and speed had left a powerful impression on Emily. Upon seeing that the 7 bone spurs on the back of the little skeleton could even harm someone, she had a deeper understanding of Hansha'o's mysteriousness. Duke was already having trouble fending off attacks from Emily alone. He'd actually been hoping that Eric would help him after taking care of Hansha'o. He hadn't thought that the seasoned and well-experienced Eric would die so quickly. Hansha'o was still standing there, having made not a move. This made Duke panic momentarily. "What, you want to run? Do you think you can get away today?" After killing Eric, the original demon noticed that Duke's eyes were darting around. Hansha'o drew near to him with a shadow of a smile as he opened his mouth in mockery. Duke's face suddenly grew frosty as his usually benevolent features twisted as he stared at Hansha'o. "You're seeking death." Many sharp shards of bone fragments on the ground suddenly shot toward Hansha'o as Duke waved his magic staff. The sound they made while shooting through the air was extremely ear-piercing, and their momentum was quite frightening. When Emily saw that Hansha'o was under attack, she was even more nervous than Hansha'o as she hastily chanted a dark magic spell. An inky black opening appeared out of thin air before these sharp bone fragments reached Hansha'o. When the bone fragments arrived, they were all attracted to the black opening and completely sucked in. After releasing his attack, Duke didn't continue to attack but rather hurtled his body towards the outside in an attempt to escape. It looked like he'd counted on Emily being concerned for Hansha'o. That's why he'd attacked Hansha'o, so that Emily would save him and then take advantage of the opportunity to run off. However, it was easy to enter the cemetery of death but quite difficult to leave. After the Eye of Darkness had revealed itself, it had once again sank back into Hansha'o's space ring. Without the Eye of Darkness, even him, a Wind Archmage, would be unable to open the boundary. He crashed headfirst into the boundary and a large bang sounded out. A ball of green light flared out from the boundary as Duke was affected by its power. He was unable to maintain his levitation spell and fell from midair. Some broken pieces of bone happened to pierce his calf's stomach and waist, causing immediate injury to his body. "My condolences." Hansha'o approached Duke with a cold smile as Emily and the little skeleton surrounded Duke. Hansha'o ripped the mask off his face and said, "Long time no see, benevolent Mr. Duke." Duke, crying out painfully, immediately spoke with fear when he saw Hansha'o reveal his true face. "Why is it you? I remember that I once saw you in the Babylon Academy. Aren't you that necromancy student?" Nodding, Hansha'o smiled sinisterly and said, "That's right, it's me." He then took out the Eye of Darkness and placed it on his palm, lighting it up. "The small errand boy whose tracks you guys discovered last time in the cemetery in the mountains at the back of the academy was also me. Hey, I was the one who gained the Eye of Darkness that Dylan buried in the ground. You guys didn't think that I wouldn't die, did you? It's come full circle not too long afterwards. So you were the one who obtained the Eye of Darkness. No wonder the boundary to the cemetery of death was opened after that light came from your body." Duke spoke in sudden enlightenment. 3 more zombie warriors appeared, making it a total of 4 zombie warriors and 1 little skeleton. They walked slowly towards Archmage Duke. Hansha'o raised his crossbow and took aim at Duke. Emily chanted a dark major spell, officially sealing Duke's fate as the little skeleton's 7 bone spurs flew around in a dance. When the 7 bone spurs flew out, Duke used wind blades to rapidly defend against them all, but the approaching 4 zombie warriors and little skeleton made him feel quite troubled. When Hansha'o's crossbow had shot it, the bolt pierced through the hastily dodging Duke's thigh and nailed him to the ground. Emily's dark magic had already enclosed Duke before Hansha'o had taken out the Demon Slayer wretch. Thick smoke rose up from Duke's body in that instant as he became another set of stark white bones within the cemetery of death. The little skeleton drew close to Duke and took off the space ring from the white bones of his hand. He handed it over to Hansha'o along with the pouch of the senior swordsman Eric. Emily stared at the little skeleton with clear eyes and was dumbfounded for quite a while by the little skeleton's motions. She finally couldn't hold it in any longer and asked Hansha'o with an exceedingly high amount of curiosity, curiosity, can you tell me what was up with that wondrous little skeleton? Hey, nothing much. I refined it with a secret art. That's why its performance is so wondrous. Rubbing the little skeleton's clean and smooth skull cap, Han Sha-Oh smiled as he picked up the spoils of battle being offered up to him. Emily glared fiercely at Han Sha-Oh and said huffily, just how many more things are you hiding from me? Why do you have the Eye of Darkness, and how come you're able to refine such an amazing skeletal warrior? You're just a small necromancer, yet you also have uncommon fighting techniques. Just what is going on here? Some things had to be explained at this moment. Han Sha-Oh explained everything that had happened in the Necromancy Major, including the discovery of the Cemetery of Death, to Emily. However, he still didn't mention anything with regards to refining the little skeleton and the magical yuan. This conversation caused exceedingly great shock to Emily. As she contemplated silently, Han Sha-Oh started searching through Duke's and Eric's things. But after rifling for a while, Han Sha-Oh discovered that Eric was one heck of a poor guy. There wasn't anything valuable in his pouch. Duke should have had some interesting items on him, but he'd set up a magical boundary within his space ring, and Han Sha-Oh was completely unable to break it to obtain anything from inside. After a while, Emily looked at Han Sha-Oh with a grave face. Does anyone else know that you've obtained the Eye of Darkness and that you can come and go from the Cemetery of Death apart from you and me? No one else knows. Han Sha-Oh looked at Emily and hesitated before asking, what do you plan to do? In that case, then we'll continue to keep this secret. Duke and Eric are dead anyways, and the agent that the organization had sent to chase them is gone. No one else knows about this matter. Then in the future, the Cemetery of Death is still your secret alone, the foundations for you to train your body to slowly control the dark forest. Emily gazed deeply at Han Sha-Oh as she spoke slowly. Staring in stupefaction for a bit, Han Sha-Oh smiled slightly and suddenly yanked Emily into his arms. He smiled. You're my woman, alright. I thought you'd want me to offer the secret of the Cemetery of Death to the organization. Rolling her eyes in a display of ill temper at Han Sha-Oh, Emily said, do you think I don't know what you're thinking? If you wanted to tell the organization about this secret, you would have done so a long time ago. Why would you wait until now? I understand what the Cemetery of Death means to you, and it seems very important for your future development. We're already like this now. I would naturally think for you. Han Sha-Oh was really a bit touched upon hearing Emily's words. He privately thought to himself that women were incomprehensible creatures, alright. Once their bodies and hearts were captured, then all their previous resolutions would completely collapse. When she spoke these words, it meant that Emily had chosen to lean toward Han Sha-Oh between the Dark Mantle and himself. If Han Sha-Oh had any conflicts with the Dark Mantle in the future, it looked like Emily would be willing to make a stand against the Dark Mantle for Han Sha-Oh. Right, you said that your goal this time was to investigate where those weapons had gone. I used the forest trolls to rob that batch of resources this time. Will it affect your mission? Seeing that Emily was thinking on his behalf, Han Sha-Oh thought for a bit and suddenly recalled what Emily had mentioned last time, and so opened his mouth to ask her. Smiling merrily for a bit, Emily looked soulfully at Han Sha-Oh in the midst of his surprise. You bad boy, you're finally willing to think of my situation. How nice. Han Sha-Oh was speechless as he thought back to prior events and discovered that he really had never thought on Emily's behalf. He'd thought for himself from start to finish, and he now felt a bit embarrassed by her words. He laughed a bit awkwardly. Don't worry too much about this matter. I actually had a fair guess of where these resources were going. I just wanted to catch him in the act so that he'd have nothing to say. Although these resources have been intercepted, many of the McGrady Guild's men have made it out. They'll surely think of a way to ransom back the siege weapons from the forest trolls. If anyone wants to purchase the siege weapons from the forest trolls, just let them handle the matters they usually would. You'd be doing me a great favor that way. When they obtain all their items, they'll still deliver it to my target. I'll arrest him then, and it won't affect the greater picture. Emily looked at Han Sha-Oh and said with a smile. Nodding, Han Sha-Oh said, no problem, I'll go back to the Empire and get my hands on some rations. I'll return to the Dark Forest after that. I'll go speak to the forest trolls so it won't impact your mission at all. Oh right, you can't open Duke's space ring either, so why not give it to me? I'll think of a way to break through the barrier and see just what's inside. Okay, Okay, you take it then. Han Shao straightforwardly handed Duke's space ring over to Emily and then suddenly remembered Yuna's pretty space ring from his previous encounter when that thought struck him. Yuna was only an adept mage. Theoretically the boundary that she'd set up should be easily broken by Emily. Therefore he took out Yuna's space ring and gave it to Emily. There's also a boundary placed within this space ring, but that person was only an adept mage. I think you should be able to break the barrier inside and see what's in it. Emily took the space ring without asking how Han Shao obtained it, took a deep breath and focused her concentration. The jade green space ring suddenly lit up and abruptly dimmed when a strong pulse of magic was felt. Breathing out slightly, a few items suddenly appeared in Emily's hand. There were some female personal effects, a crystal card, a book on water magic and some medicine to treat injuries. Staring at Han Shao oddly, Emily asked, "To think you would be such a brutal person as to destroy a feminine flower. How did this woman die in your hands?" Turning the items over after taking them from Emily, Han Shao put away the jade green space ring when he discovered there wasn't anything valuable. He smiled. "A wanton woman betrayed me. I was so angry that I killed her." "This is quite normal, Pa." "I don't believe you," Emily said. "Alright, I have 2 more days before I need to report to the organization. I must hurry and leave the cemetery of death. You already know my identity and origins, so we can temporarily leave this place. Go about your business first, whether you are going to report to the Dark Mantle or the Academy first. I think it'll be easy for me to find you. We should part ways here." Han Shao remembered that he had a ton of things to do and spoke to Emily. "Alright, although you're a dishonest brat, it is indeed easy for me to find you. I'll ask you a final question. Between Brian and that weird name Han Shao, which one should I call you by?" Emily asked. "How about Han Shao? This is the new name that the person who passed on the martial arts technique created for me. Call me that in the future." Han Shao thought for a moment and responded. Nodding and saying nothing else, Han Shao took Emily on a quick tour around the cemetery and the two left via the transportation matrix amidst Emily's repeated exclamations of surprise. Chapter 123, "You didn't trap the giant dragon, did you?" After leaving the cemetery of death, Han Shao and Emily went separate ways. Emily still had to accomplish her mission from her superiors and couldn't stay by Han Shao's side. He hadn't returned to the Babylon Academy in a while and he was rather missing Fanny. Except the whole incident with Emily had happened and this made Han Shao a bit uncertain of how to face Fanny. He hesitated and didn't directly return to the Academy, rather walking to the Boost Merchant Guild first. Han Shao had asked Phoebe to help look for items to refine an Earth Elite zombie. So much time had passed, it was time to ask if she was ready. There were also treasures that had come from the Forest Troll's sacred land within his space ring that needed to be disposed of via Phoebe. Add to that the fact that he needed to prepare rations for the Forest Trolls and the dwarfs, so he rather needed to make a trip to the Boost Merchant Guild. After experiencing the Grover incident, Phoebe had already grasped the reins of power at the guild. After making a couple of visits, those within the guild were all familiar with Han Shao. When Han Shao presented himself at the door this time, the guards sent him in directly. When he walked towards the living room, Han Shao suddenly heard the sounds of Fabian lecturing someone in a room. "Your father spent gold coins to help you enter the guild, so you must work hard. Otherwise, with my position in the guild, I won't be able to protect you." "Understood, uncle." Another voice that Han Shao was familiar with responded honestly. When this voice sounded, Han Shao's body sped up in surprise. When he arrived at the door to the room, he pushed the door open without knocking because he was so agitated, giving Fabian a shock. He immediately cried out, "Who dares to trespass in my territory?" "It's me, Mr. Fabian." Han Shao laughed lightly and walked in with great strides. When he heard Han Shao's voice, Fabian heaved a sigh of relief and walked out chuckling from the room. He said, "So you've come. Hey, are you here to come see our Miss Phoebe again?" Another fat and chubby body quickly dashed out of the house. When he saw Han Shao, he cried out with unexpected surprise, "Brian, how come it's you? How come you're in the Boost Merchant Guild as well?" Hey, are you a member of the guild as well? We can be colleagues again?" Little Fatty Jack's body had grown a bit taller, but his weight seemed to have increased even faster. When he rushed out of the house with large strides, the ground sounded with thumps. long time no see Jack. How come you're with the guild? Han Sha-oh was also quite happy to see Jack again. Little fatty Jack was the closest friend that Han Sha-oh had met after arriving at the academy. When Han Sha-oh gave him a sum of money last time, he thought he'd never see Jack again. Who would have thought that the two would see each other again after not too long had passed? You two know each other? Fabian was a bit taken aback as he looked at Jack and then at Han Sha-oh. Nodding, Han Sha-oh smiled as he explained, when I was in the academy I was an errand boy with Jack. Hey, not only do we know each other but our relationship is quite good. Yes, Uncle Brian is quite amazing. Who would have thought that I'd run into him here? Jack said, delighted. Mr. Fabian, I'd like to catch up with your nephew. I'll go meet Miss Phoebe later. Please pass that along for me, Han Sha-oh said to Fabian with a smile. Han Sha-oh had saved Fabian and Phoebe's lives and had brought a great deal of business with him the last couple of times. This made Fabian long since view Han Sha-oh as a person of great fortune. When he heard Han Sha-oh speak thus, he immediately agreed and winked at Jack as if hinting something to Jack. It was a pity that the excited Jack didn't discover his uncle's hints, but rather the more mature and experienced Han Sha-oh saw it all clearly and laughed ceaselessly in his heart. When Fabian left, Han Sha-oh immediately asked Jack, how did you come to the Boost Merchant Guild? When you gave me the gold coins, I left the academy. When I returned home I didn't know what to do and helped my father butcher cows and sheep. I saw that things were difficult at home, so I secretly exchanged the gold coins you gave me into bits and pieces and gave them to my father, but he discovered my secret in the end, so I told him I found a bag of gold coins on the streets. My father felt that I couldn't always be a butcher, and so he took half of the gold coins to find my uncle Fabian to ask him to let me help in the guild. I'm learning bookkeeping from someone, and that's how things are. Right, why are you in the guild? I see that my uncle seems to have a lot of respect for you. What's going on here? Jack looked at Han Sha-oh with surprise and asked in confusion. Han Sha-oh said something random and fobbed Jack off with them. Han Sha-oh and Jack chatted for a while. From Jack's expression and words, Han Sha-oh felt that he was actually quite happy to work for the guild. So he decided to help Jack a bit and was prepared to say something to Phoebe. He felt that Phoebe would at least give him this face. No wonder he was happy to stay here. When he was an errand boy in the academy before, not only did Jack have to work day and night, but he was often bullied by other students and errand boys. His days weren't too comfortable. Now that he was in the guild, he had the protection of someone like Fabian who worked at Phoebe's side. At least no one dared do anything to him. Compared to the back-breaking work of an errand boy, the material he was now learning was much more interesting. No wonder Jack liked it here. They talked for quite a while until Fabian came to rush Han Sha-oh, telling him that Miss Phoebe was waiting for him. Han Sha-oh then patted Jack's shoulder, saying with a smile, then I'll be going. Since you're within the guild, we'll have plenty of chances to meet in the future. Alright, you go about your business. Come see me whenever you have the chance. Although I'm doing well here, I don't have that many friends. I know. After leaving Fabian's room, Han Sha-oh's sensitive ears immediately heard Fabian and Jack's conversation. Fabian was telling Jack to build a good relationship with Han Sha-oh, saying that Han Sha-oh was a person of great fortune, etc. Phoebe was still stunning as usual. A well-tailored, form-fitting green robe even more fully offset her tall, slender and uncommon demeanor. Faint blush powdered onto her cheeks displayed their clean smoothness with a hint of red blush hidden within them. Her bright eyes were embedded into a face that seemed a work of art, appearing completely perfect and flawless. You've disappeared for almost a month. What do you plan on talking about this time? The surrounding maids had long since left as Phoebe sat within the hall holding a cup of tea within her hands and leisurely sipping it. She flicked a non-committal glance at Han Sha-oh and delivered her words faintly. I've only been gone for a month, but why does Miss Phoebe look even more beautiful? Han Sha-oh spoke truly. When he'd seen Phoebe before, she'd never purposefully dressed up, but this time she'd noticeably put on some makeup and her beauty truly had been enhanced a bit in Han Sha-oh's eyes. When these words were spoken, Phoebe's eyes lit up as the faint red on her cheeks slowly spread out. A happy curve traced her lips as she said in a soft, gentle voice, you've grown more glib in the month that I haven't seen you. Laughing heartily, Han Sha-oh walked in front of Phoebe and took the teapot and cup from in front of Phoebe, pouring himself a cup and taking a sip before saying, before we chat about serious matters, I hope you can do me a favor. help my friend advance a bit. Phoebe wasn't surprised to hear that, and her translucent chin nodded lightly twice. She said in a quiet and beautiful voice, I heard from Fabian just now. Who would have thought that you'd be friends with the fatty? Hey, he's such an honest person and has you as a friend? Breaking out into laughter, Han Shao scratched his head. With your words, am I not honest enough? Humphrey, if you counted as honest, then there'd be no people who don't abide by the rules in this world. I remember all the bad things you've done to me. How dare you say that you're honest? Phoebe rolled her eyes in a pretty way as she bit off her words while glaring at Han Shao, abruptly taking in a sip of tea to hide his awkwardness. Han Shao said awkwardly, don't mention what's in the past. You still haven't agreed to help me take care of Jack. No problem, I'll take good care of him for you. It's easy to help you with a small matter like this, but the other matter is a bit trickier, Phoebe said a bit thoughtfully. Starting, Han Shao looked askance at Phoebe, asking what's tricky? About the materials you asked me to buy for you. Phoebe thought for a moment and opened her mouth to speak. The refinement of the Earth Elite Zombie was something that Han Shao felt imperative he wanted to complete. When he heard Phoebe said that she'd run into some trouble, Han Shao immediately felt a bit worried. He hastily asked, what trouble? Is it that your guild can't find those materials? Shaking her head, Phoebe's painted eyebrow creased slightly as she sighed lowly. With our guild's abilities, if these items exist in the world, then we'll be able to get our hands on it as long as someone can afford the price. I had thought that the items wouldn't be that expensive, but who would have thought that after a careful inquiry I'd discover that all those unknown items would all be at an exorbitant price. According to my calculations, all these materials added together would need at least 30,000 gold coins. Although I hold the power within the guild, but I've just become the head and don't have the authority to completely mask such a large transaction for you, because each transaction will leave behind a record. Han Shao had been a bit worried when he heard her say she'd run into troubles, but now that he saw that it was due to the price, he rather breathed a sigh of relief. The current Han Shao could be short on other things, but he had so many gold coins that he couldn't take them all with him at any given time. When he heard Phoebe say that the problems resulted from pricing, he immediately smiled. What are you smiling about? I know you've got some savings in your hands, but 30,000 gold coins isn't a small amount. I can privately put together 10,000 for you, but I can't access my father's savings before I'm 25, so I can only take out so much. Why are you still laughing? I'm talking about serious matters. Phoebe was frowning and trying to think of a plan for Han Shao, but he was smiling and laughing as if nothing was the matter. This made Phoebe feel a bit irate. Right, how old are you now? Han Shao halted and asked Phoebe. Her face reddening, Phoebe appeared a bit shy. She hesitated and then snuck a glance at Han Shao with a bashful expression. 23, you? 17, Han Shao said. Phoebe's face whitened and she appeared a bit panicked. She hastily cried out, who are you kidding? Do you talk and look like a 17-year-old? Han Shao only remembered that he'd already been 24 when he'd possessed Brian's body. Brian had originally been thin and small, but now looked completely like an adult after the reforging from the magical yuan. Add to that his original way of speech and experiences, he didn't look like a 17-year-old no matter how one cut it. Thinking for a while, Han Shao finally chuckled. I'm kidding, I'm 24. Phoebe noticeably heaved a sigh of relief when she heard these words and then laughed tryly at Han Shao. Don't think of using me to make a plan. There's still 2 more years until I'm 25. I don't think you can wait 2 more years. Let's think of another plan. A smile still hanging on his lips, Han Shao blew a breath of air at the space ring and rubbed it with his fingers. Blocks of gold and all sorts of jewels, jade and precious gems appeared one after another within the hall. In that instant the hall was filled with the luster from the jewels, as all sorts of dazzling opulent splendor made the hall extremely luxurious and extravagant. Is this enough? Han Shao looked at Phoebe, who'd sunk into a dumbfounded state, and asked merrily. The riches within the hall had come from many years of forest troll looting. When he took them all from the space ring and piled them in front of Phoebe, it did indeed cause a huge shock to her. Heart of the Blue Ocean, Sierra Leone jade, the Madame necklace, King Finley's crown. Phoebe's stunning face was full of shock as her slender fingers rifled through the jewels that had appeared. She murmured these amazing names in a low voice. After a while, Phoebe took in a few breaths in a row, finally looking deeply at Han Shao and asking, a lot of missing treasures are here. You didn't rob a giant dragon, did you? Shaking his head with a low laugh, Han Shao said, don't ask how I obtained buying these items, just tell me if they're enough for me to exchange for the materials I requested. I temporarily can't estimate the value of these goods, but I think their value will definitely exceed 30,000 gold coins. Phoebe's clear eyes still stared firmly at Han Shao as she slowly responded. Nodding, Han Shao said straightforwardly, "Good, these items are showy but not substantial. They don't have much value for me. Collect them all and dispose of them for me at a reasonable price. I need the materials that I mentioned earlier. In addition, please purchase another space ring for me. I'd like to take the rations from last time with me. With so many treasures, aren't you afraid that I'll list some random price that disadvantages you?" Phoebe looked at Han Shao and stared for a bit, a trace of a faint smile blossoming on her lips as she asked him, "I believe that you won't." Han Shao smiled. "I'll visit again in a few days. I hope the items I need will be ready then. Stay for lunch." Phoebe nodded and hesitated, suddenly saying lightly when she saw that Han Shao was about to leave after leaving the treasures behind. Han Shao felt a bit strange when he heard these words, but Phoebe truly could help him with a great deal of things right now. Although he had a lot of things to handle at the moment, the time it took to eat a meal wasn't that long either. Therefore he decisively nodded and agreed to it. The location of lunch was near the artificial mountains where Phoebe and Han Shao had once crushed themselves into. This place had been redecorated now, and all sorts of expensive flowers and grass had been planted in the surroundings. The branches and leaves of some green and luxuriant soft plants were entwined around the stone pillars of the little pavilion. It looked quite charming. Han Shao continuously felt a bit uncomfortable as he sat at the table within the little pavilion after the maids had filled it with food and wine. His eyes kept drifting to the crack in the artificial mountain that he'd squeezed into with Phoebe as he kept recalling what had happened here. Phoebe rather looked quite comfortable, and she didn't seem to pay any attention to that area at all. She waved her hand and dismissed all the maids and guards, hospitably encouraging Han Shao to drink wine and tea. This change in attitude made Han Shao feel uncomfortable. After eating and drinking, although Han Shao wouldn't get drunk thanks to the magical yuan now that he'd tasted the wonders of women, he kept recalling the time that he'd taken advantage of Phoebe for some reason. His serious and professional glances at Phoebe were suffused with another meaning at some unknown point. Phoebe observed Han Shao's changes, and whether it was because of the sweet wine, her cheeks became even more reddened and beautiful. As her chilly facade retreated, Phoebe's charms continued to increase rapidly, making Han Shao across the table from her panic inwardly and think random thoughts. Chapter 124, "We haven't even slept together. Why are you looking at me like that?" Phoebe drank another cup of translucent and clear red wine that sparkled with a wondrous light. She flicked a glance at Han Shao as she said lowly, "No. Nothing much." Han Shao panicked and he stammered a bit. "Then why are you drooling?" Phoebe pointed at the corner of Han Shao's mouth as she lightly laughed playfully. He touched his chin and discovered that there really was some trace of water on his chin. Han Shao said awkwardly, "That isn't drool. It's wine. It's really wine." "Oh," Phoebe smiled delightedly, "so it's wine. How is it possible that you'd miss some even when drinking wine? How interesting." He kept feeling that the atmosphere was a bit odd. Han Shao felt very comfortable at heart as he listened to Phoebe's soft and gentle words. His mind kept making connections as his eyes once again involuntarily drifted to the crack in the artificial mountain. "It's only been a short time since we started eating and you've already glanced to the left at the crack in the artificial mountain 9 times. Just what is there that deserves your attention?" Phoebe's beautiful eyes darted around and landed on Han Shao's body as she said lightly. Panicking inwardly, Han Shao blurted out, "How do you know that I kept glancing at that area and that I've done so 9 times? These words made Phoebe's face even redder. She tsked lightly and said lowly, "You've been looking around shiftily. Sitting in front of you, of course I saw everything. I know what bad thoughts you were harboring when you looked there." "Then what bad thoughts would you say I've been thinking?" After what he'd just gone through, Han Shao suddenly felt that he was a bit too passive. A demonic practitioner was unafraid of all conventions and was most at ease when he did what was on his mind, no matter what others would think or say. When he suddenly understood this, Han Shao no longer wildly casted around surreptitious glances but rather stared directly at Phoebe and asked her with a smile. Phoebe started as the red blush on her cheeks slowly spread down her slender white neck. She stuttered and stammered but didn't say anything with her reddened face. Her affectedly bashful face was even more ill at ease than Han Shao had been earlier. Seeing Phoebe like this, Han Shao gave a happy laugh, feeling that the depressing passivity from earlier was completely swept away. He said merrily, "Who would have thought that Miss Phoebe would care so much about me? You've even noted how many times I glanced over. I'm truly overwhelmed by your favor." "Oh shut up, Brian, I've discovered that you're full of bad thoughts. Looks like I'll receive the short end of the stick whenever I do business with you in the future." Phoebe flew into a rage and glared fiercely at Han Shao, complaining as she did so. When Phoebe said this, Han Shao suddenly remembered the matter having to do with the McGrady Guild. The humor on his face was immediately replaced with seriousness as he asked Phoebe, "Talking of business suddenly reminds me of something. You mentioned the McGrady Guild last time and said that they were your competition, right?" Phoebe was a bit surprised that Han Shao had suddenly mentioned this, and she looked at him taken aback. Phoebe nodded and responded, "That's right, the McGrady Guild belongs to the Brute Merchants Alliance and have been doing a lot of business in our Lancelot Empire lately. The items they transport do not travel through the towns of the Empire, and thus, they don't need to pay customs taxes to the Empire. When their goods arrive, they can keep their prices low and thus impact our guild's business a bit as well." Smiling faintly, Han Shao said, "Not going through the proper channels can indeed result in large profits. There are particularly huge, even frightening profits to be made in the industries forbidden by the Empire. The McGrady Guild is quite daring to act and risk a lot." "Why are you suddenly mentioning the McGrady Guild?" Phoebe looked at Han Shao with confusion as she asked him. "I have a friend in the Dark Forest with a rather particular profession. He robbed the McGrady Guild entourage lately and came by many luxury items. He wants me to get rid of them. I wonder if I can do that through you." "Being a robber is a robber. What particular profession?" "There are all sorts of robbers within the Dark Forest. There's nothing strange about that." Hey, the McGrady Guild wouldn't dare pass through the Empire's cities because they want to avoid the high customs taxes. However, this nationally increases their risk of danger, but their McGrady Guild has private guards and therefore very few robbers are blind enough to make a move against them. Your friend is quite something to be able to rob them." "Of course." "So do you dare accept goods from the McGrady Guild?" "Our guild will accept everything as long as it's not siege weapons." "I've heard that the Empire is investigating this area rather closely recently." "Forget it if it's siege weapons." Han Shao remembered the matter that Emily had mentioned when Phoebe spoke, and he seemed to catch a vague hint of something. However, Han Shao had long since promised Emily the batch of war resources. He'd only planned on selling to Phoebe the goods used by nobles, and so he had no particular concerns. "Be at peace, I wouldn't make life difficult for you. I've eaten well today and will come by in a few days to come find you again. Help me take care of my matters as soon as possible if you can." Han Shao comforted Phoebe and stood up, preparing to take his leave. Seeing that Han Shao was about to leave, Phoebe hesitated and then said with a bit of difficulty, "I actually have a favor to ask as well." Looking at Phoebe in baffled surprise, Han Shao asked, "What is it?" "I need to attend a banquet in 5 days' time. If I appear alone, some annoying people may bother me. I'd like for you to come with me and act as my boyfriend like last time." Phoebe looked a bit shyly at Han Shao and said lightly, a rueful smile on his face. Han Shao shook his head. "Forget it, I don't want to be your shield again. If I trigger someone else's jealousy and they come at me from the darkness, I'll be in some danger." "Why don't you find someone else?" "No," Phoebe shouted and then explained with a wry expression, "I've previously introduced you to the founding elders in the guild. If I suddenly change to someone else within a month, they'll say I have loose morals. This absolutely won't do." Han Shao was still hesitant and appeared a bit ill at ease. Phoebe stared at Han Shao and then pouted. "If someone doesn't agree, then I won't be serious about my business either. It will be very normal if the thing that I promised him is delayed by 10 days or half a month." This was what Han Shao didn't want to see. He had no choice but to nod after Phoebe's words and say, "Then all right, as long as you don't think I'm embarrassing you, then there we go. How could you allow someone else to take me to the banquet? What if they take advantage of me? Wouldn't you be worried?" A faint smile reappeared on Phoebe's face when she saw Han Shao agree. "Then aren't you afraid that I'll take advantage of you?" Han Shao rolled his eyes at Phoebe and said bad-temperedly. When he said these words, Phoebe's beautiful face flushed again and she turned her head away, too shy to look at Han Shao. She said lowly, "No, you've already taken all the advantage you can." Han Shao-Oh's heart lurched as he looked at the redness of Phoebe's neck and ears and in a curious coincidence blurted out, "Not all, we haven't even slept together." Han Shao immediately reacted and swiftly walked towards the outside before Phoebe had a chance to speak. He hastily said, "I'll be going now that I'm full. I'll come by 5 days later." "You rubbish-talking villain." Phoebe hadn't thought that Han Shao would say such things and immediately flew into a rage. She cursed at Han Shao's fleeing back and only broke out into a low laugh when his body sped up and vanished. "Damn it, how dare he say that to me?" He's getting bolder and bolder. It was just past noon after leaving the Boost Merchant Guild. Since the last time he'd reported into the Dark Mantle it was almost a month. Thus, after seeing the time, Han Shao hired a carriage and set off for the Dark Mantle's stronghold. When he was a street away, Han Shao disembarked and released the 3 original demons to survey the surroundings, walking to the manor on foot. "Boss, you're finally here. I've been counting the days and knew that you would come and report soon. Therefore I purposefully swapped shifts with others and have been waiting here to bring you into the organization's interior." The bandit Chester squirmed out from inside when Han Shao arrived and said lowly with excitement, "Why are you calling me boss?" Han Shao looked oddly at Chester and asked him with confusion, "I'll follow you in the future and I hope that you'll give me tips and pointers." "Of course I need to express my respect towards you," Chester said matter-of-factly toward Han Shao. "This title doesn't sound very nice, let's just go by our given names." Hey, but don't you worry. If there are any good missions I'll ask to bring you along as well," Han Shao said. After receiving Han Shao's promise, Chester appeared overjoyed and brought Han Shao inside with passion and excitement. He chatted away non-stop asking where Han Shao had been during this time and if he'd gone out on any missions. Han Shao carelessly responded to Chester's questions and walked slowly into the internals of the Dark Mantle organization. There was no surprise for him this time and he walked with an air of familiarity directly towards Candide's room. "Ooh, you really are here. I thought Emily was lying to me." Candide sat in a shadowy corner and was examining something in a magical flask. He didn't raise his head when Han Shao came in. Han Shao hadn't anticipated that Emily would mention him and was a bit surprised. He didn't know what Emily had said to Candide and thus stood there silently. After a while Candide put away the flask in his hands, finally speaking with his never-changing sinister face. "Emily said she happened to bump into you in the dark forest and rather admired your style and competency." "I was quite surprised. I hadn't thought that Emily with her high standards would speak so highly of you. It looks like there truly are some unique things about you." "No shit, Emily's my woman, of course she'd say good things about me," Han Shao thought with pride but maintained his usual expression on his face. He opened his mouth to say, "It's been 1 month since my last mission. I've come to report in as per the rules and see if there are any other missions." The Dark Mantle usually didn't interfere in personal matters, thus Han Shao didn't go into detail about how he and Emily had met. Since Emily had already spoken of it, she surely would have concealed all that had to be concealed. As long as Han Shao didn't give anything away, nothing would happen at all. Nodding, Candide said, "Emily gave you a round of compliments and said that she wanted you to complete the mission in her hands with her. You'll share the rewards and honor together then. What do you think?" "You're one of mine. Emily won't be able to make use of you without your agreement, but if you agree then it's another matter entirely." With Han Shao and Emily's relationship now, there was naturally no reason not to agree. Not to mention Emily needed to get the resources out of the forest trolls through Han Shao for her mission. He had already become unwittingly embroiled in all this. If this became a mission that he could benefit from, then it'd be even better. "No problem, I'm willing to complete the mission with her." Han Shao didn't hesitate and nodded in agreement. He paused and said, "The bandit who brought me in Chester is quite smart. Can he join as well?" "The mission is Emily's, it's up to her if she needs another person." "You can ask her directly," Candide said, faintly paused and then said, "Emily is Emily's sister by blood. Her status within the Dark Mantle is low. It will be good for you to interact more with her. However, Emily's identity within reality is a bit mysterious. Keep an eye out, don't give others any gossip to talk about. Amos was one of the three heavyweights of the Dark Mantle and was in charge of surveillance and investigation of all nobles and officials. He was a character within the Dark Mantle who was hugely active in the political scene and one who held great power in his hands. To think that Emily was his sister by blood. In addition, Candide seemed to be alluding to something else about Emily's other identity. This made Han Shao a bit surprised, unsure of the meaning within his words. Looks like you didn't know all this. Let this be a reminder to be careful. This will be all. She's already pulled your information to peruse and will be able to find you easily. Come find me after you complete the mission with her, Candide said as he looked at Han Shao. Chapter 125. I'm damn good, aren't I? When he left the Dark Mantle, Han Shao left some instructions with Chester telling him to wait here for news. When he walked out of the Dark Mantle headquarters, Han Shao didn't linger and returned to the academy. When he was about to arrive, he disembarked from his carriage and went to the graveyard in the mountains behind the academy, entering the tomb that went to the Cemetery of Death. He didn't return to the Cemetery of Death but rather rubbed his space ring and took out the fruit of Dagmar that was shaped like a human brain. Han Shao had sealed the three fruits in special containers. When he took it out, he took a good look and discovered that this fruit of Dagmar didn't have a remarkable appearance and it looked rather ugly. Taking a deep breath in, Han Shao sat down cross-legged, hesitated and swallowed the fruit of Dagmar that was a bit larger than the size of a fist. It tasted a bit bitter and was tough to chew. It tasted really bad compared to normal ordinary fruit. When Han Shao had completely swallowed the fruit of Dagmar, he immediately circulated his magical yuan and slowly started concentrating it towards the back of his brain. Nothing abnormal happened as first, but Han Shao slowly felt something was different after some time had passed. Swirls of strange energy emanated from his stomach and bubbled up from his lower abdomen, spinning as they moved to the brain. The strange energy within these swirls was accompanied by a pain that pierced into his bone marrow. Even Han Shao, with his resolute tenacity and willpower, felt it was a bit tough to endure. When these bubbles of strange energy made it to Han Shao's brain, his mind shuddered greatly as if 100 bombs were exploding at the same time. The sounds of explosions rocketed through his brain. Bone-piercing pain accompanied the violent explosions in his head. When his brain had been opened up by the magical yuan, the perceptiveness of his five senses greatly increased. Han Shao could feel that the folds on the left and right sides of his brain was suffused with the power within the swirls. It was a bit similar to when Han Shao had expanded his meridians. Because of the effects of the fruit of Dagmar, Han Shao's brain was being developed bit by bit. This process was mysterious and strange. Even Han Shao didn't know what had happened as he succumbed under the painful process. If it had been anyone else going through such strong stimulation of their brain, they would basically immediately turn into an idiot or a madman. This was because the brain was the most complex thing in the world. Any abnormalities within it could immediately trigger changes that upended the heavens and earth. This kind of bone-achingly deep pain that seeped into a person's heart would be enough to immediately make a normal person lose their mind and never recover from it. Even Han Shao, someone with extreme mental strength and the protection of the magical yuan, suffered greatly throughout this process under the effects of the fruit of Dagmar. Any other bystander would have only faced death in front of them. His entire body trembling, Han Shao was raining sweat as he sat there cross-legged. He hadn't screamed himself hoarse in a long time, but these screams once again erupted uncontrollably from his mouth. Finally, in the end, the place that Han Shao was sitting on was soaked with sweat, and his hoarse screams slowly became weaker and his lips trembled like the rest of his body. He remained in this position for a long time as Han Shao lay there stiffly within the drenched soil, sinking into a coma in that instant. After who knew how long, Han Shao slowly woke up. When he came to himself, he felt that his head hurt so much that it was about to split open and that his body ached all over. He raised his head and shifted his body. When he looked upwards, Han Shao's heart was immediately filled with delight. Within the gloom of the tomb, Han Shao could clearly see even the smallest of the patterns within the stone slabs a few meters over his head. Although Han Shao's original vision had been quite clear, the feeling was even more marvelous now, and he barely believed his own eyes in that moment. When he carefully observed the four corners and discovered that he could see anything within the dusk of the tomb as long as he concentrated, Han Shuo's astonishment grew even greater. It was as if his eyes had transformed into a magnifying glass. If he slowly concentrated on something a few meters away, the distance would seem to slowly decrease. The originally small dot would be slowly enhanced, with him finally catching an eyeful of unparalleled clarity in the end. This kind of feeling was quite marvelous, and Han Shuo knew that this was absolutely due to the effects of the fruit of Dagmar. If it wasn't for the fact that one couldn't eat the fruit repeatedly, Han Shuo really wanted to swallow the other two whole as well. In a frenzy of joy, Han Shuo sat down and meditated for a bit. He found that the concentration and circulation speed of his mental strength had indeed greatly increased. In this regard, when Han Shuo meditated, he would obtain mental strength at an increased rate. When he used magic to fight against others, the recovery rate of his mental strength from meditation after it had been exhausted would be vastly greater than the ordinary person's. This meant that whether in terms of training or battle, Han Shuo would be able to operate at a much faster tempo than ordinary mages. In his great joy, Han Shuo didn't linger in this place. Now that he felt his mental strength had increased, Han Shuo decided to advance to the next step of necromancy magic. Han Shuo had only been able to fully grasp and skillfully employ several novice necromancy magics until now. With the increase of his mental strength, Han Shuo was confident that he could achieve another breakthrough. It looked like it wouldn't be a difficult thing to graduate from the necromancy major as an adept mage in a short period of time. Han Shuo had studied some of the intermediate necromancy magics for a while in the days when he was injured. There were still a few theories that he wasn't fully clear on. Now that he'd returned to the academy, it looked like it was time to find Fanny for some answers. When he crawled out of the tomb, the sky was brightening over a silvery world. There'd actually been a huge snowfall, and the snow covered everything. It was a snow-white world as far the eyes could see. As the harsh chilly wind blew, Han Shuo's already sweaty and wet body felt a bit cold. Han Shuo took off his damp clothes in this cold, snowy place and faced the silvery world with a naked body. The range of his vision had greatly increased as he looked out across the world. If it was said that Han Shuo's eyes had the function of a magnifying glass within the tomb, then his eyes seemed to have the function of a pair of binoculars. As he walked out of the tomb and looked out, his vision expanded endlessly, taking in even the sights in the distance. His eyes alighted on several nearby trees. They all appeared incredibly clear, and it was so amazing that Han Shuo almost wanted to whistle loudly in appreciation. Although Han Shuo's current body wasn't afraid of changing seasons in order not to appear too out of the ordinary, he still took out some new thicker clothes from within his space ring and wrapped up his naked body, proceeding towards the necromancy major. All the landmarks had their own flavor to them beneath the cover of the thick snow. His various memories with Fanny kept resurfacing in his mind as Han Shuo walked over, but every time he thought of his current relationship with Emily, Han Shuo felt a bit shy about facing Fanny. When he arrived at the dark major, earth-shattering yells immediately traveled into Han Shuo's ears. They were filled with excitement and fervor, as if some grand party was being held. Han Shuo was astonished as he didn't know what was going on. There were a lot of buildings in the way on his way to the dark major, so he couldn't use his amazing vision to see anything. The distance of several hundred meters would be covered quickly, so he felt no need to release the original demons. Therefore he picked up the pace and walked over quickly. There were many students and teachers occupying the enormous square. There were dark and necromancy major students within, as well as the students and teachers from other majors. There were even a few knights and swordsmen mixed in, and it was all very exciting. The enormous square appeared a bit crowded after taking in 100 people. Many students on the outside were trying to push their way inside with all their strength. There were also a few dirty and depraved fellows staring at some female students and putting the weight of their bodies on the female students, eliciting a round of light screams and yells. When he arrived here, Han Shuo had planned on releasing the original demons for surveillance, but felt strong magical pulses in the area. It looked like a magical boundary had been set up inside. If he accidentally had the original demons crash into the magical boundary and gave rise to attention from other people, that would be a bit unfavorable. Therefore he hesitated only a little bit and didn't release the original demons. He used his strong body to shove his way inside. Several thunder mages glared at Han Shuo angrily beneath his shoving and pushing, and Han Shuo paid them no heed and ignored them, ramming them aside. Their fragile and thin bodies were a far cry from Han Shuo's, and they were shoved aside as Han Shuo's actions blazed a path for him. His extraordinary senses were of use now. Han Sha-oh spied Lisa up ahead and immediately shoved aside those next to him, squirming his way towards Lisa. He was subjected to frowns and low curses along the way. When he came near to Lisa, Han Sha-oh saw an exceedingly shifty swordsman look hungrily at Lisa's now well-rounded chest. He was attempting to get closer to Lisa and take advantage of her. Now that Han Sha-oh was inside, he finally discovered that the magical boundary that had been set up was for the magical battle that was taking place inside. No wonder it had drawn a lot of attention. Lisa was giving the fascinating battle inside her full attention and would cry out excitedly every now and then. Amy and Athena at her side were just as excited and weren't paying any attention to the looks of those around her. The swordsman had finally made it next to Lisa. He was taking in his fill of Lisa's chest and licking his lips as he approached, wanting to take advantage of her in the crush. Bam! Han Sha-oh suddenly appeared midway and body slammed the approaching swordsman, pushing him into a group of male thunder mages. He was subject to a round of abuse and curses. Han Sha-oh, smiling merrily, flashed a proud grin at the swordsman who'd finally regained his footing. He then leisurely stood next to Lisa and purposefully pushed his way forward a bit, placing himself at Lisa's back. The swordsman had been about to get what he wanted when Han Sha-oh had thrown him for this loop. He displayed an angry and depressed expression, flipping Han Sha-oh off from the distance and mouthing the words, "You cut in line." Shrugging, Han Sha-oh had a proud look on his face and also slowly mouthed the words back, "So what?" Rolling his eyes, the swordsman was a bit resigned. His shifty eyes spun in a circle as he planned on finding another target. At this moment, Lisa's elbow suddenly shot back swiftly and suddenly attacked Han Sha-oh's chest, catching him unawares. However, this level of attack had absolutely no effect when it landed on Han Sha-oh. The swordsman on the other side, however, immediately revealed an expression that delighted in the misfortune of others, and he looked at Han Sha-oh with an eager expression, hoping to see him get in trouble. Huh, another blind idiot coming over to take advantage. How irritating. Lisa's impatient low growl sounded out, and she then twisted her head to angrily look over, but when she saw that it was Han Sha-oh, she immediately revealed a surprised and happy expression and hastily asked, "Hey, you've come back? I didn't know it was you. Did I hurt you just now?" Seeing the fellow across from him wanting to delight in his misfortunes, Han Sha-oh immediately pretended to rub his chest and displayed a pained expression. Lisa was greatly shocked and frantically reached out with her small hand, rubbing Han Sha-oh's chest because this place was already crowded. Lisa's movement basically made her flush against Han Sha-oh's chest. The swordsman, who'd been ready to watch Han Sha-oh go down, was flabbergasted when he saw the situation develop. Han Sha-oh had a proud smile on his face and he mouthed to the swordsman, "Aren't I awesome?" The swordsman didn't say anything else and stuck up his thumb at Han Sha-oh, indicating that, "Damn, you're good. I'm in awe." He then turned his head and set his sights on another girl pushing through once again. It looked like he was trying to see if he had the same luck as Han Sha-oh. By now Han Sha-oh could fully see the fight within the square. He kept one eye on the battle between the dark major students and the light major students and searched for traces of Fanny within the crowd.